So the saying that dirt is dirt cheap is actually accurate. The dirt's not the expensive part. The real cost actually comes from the Welcome back, Pack. This is Adil, and I'm here today with Anadela to go over one of the most important but overlooked parts of your metal building journey, and that is site prep. The site prep is basically the process of preparing your land so it's building ready, okay? So that means getting your property nice and level, there's the proper drainage, and stable enough to receive its concrete foundation, and definitely at the end, the metal building, right? So without a proper site prep, even the best building can run into problems, and that is like shifting, cracking, and even flooding.
All right, Adil, so let's go ahead and talk the real deal, which is the dirt and the site prep. So once again, the site prep is all about making sure we're getting it property level, making sure it's well drained, and of course, stable. So how do we determine, Adil, how much fill we actually need to bring in for a client?
Yeah, so that's one of the main reasons we do the site visit, right? So we go out, we check out the elevations, and that's where we determine if it's gonna be light work, just a couple cubic yards of dirt, or if it's gonna be like a very big pad, and that's gonna require, bigger truckloads with more yards of dirt.
Of course, and no truck is the same, so that also has a lot to do with it, right? So in some smaller neighborhoods, maybe those trucks are a little bit different than something compared to, as you mentioned, the Wild Wild West, which those trucks can be a little bit bigger there.
So the saying that dirt is dirt cheap is actually accurate. The dirt's not the expensive part. The real cost actually comes from the trucking and the labor to delivery, basically the drivers. So accessibility is going to be a major factor that will affect how much the cost for delivery is going to be because of the trucking and labor. And we have to adjust accordingly. And that's important because we have to protect your driveways, your lawn, and even your utility lines. Now, obviously, the slope of your ground is definitely will affect, how much dirt we're going to be bringing, but definitely then now you're adding those up: dirt, trucking, and definitely like the delivery cost of that.
Yeah, which is the next thing that we're going to be going over is going to be the undisturbed soil here, which is where we're going to get a little bit more technical. So Adil, as you mentioned, dirt is not dirt cheap, but we also need to take into consideration the type of dirt that we need to be bringing into these areas.
That's correct. So we use different types of fill depending on the terrain, okay? I'm just gonna mention the two most common examples, and that's gonna be base fill and select fill, okay? So from like Texarkana to Houston to Dallas area, we use a material called select fill, which is a blend of clay and like sand. In the hill country, which is like from Austin to San Antonio, it's a little bit more rockier grounds, and that's where we use a little bit more of base material. And that's more like crushed stone, rock fines, and like clay mixed.
So what is the deal, Adil, with footers into undisturbed soil? So if clients see that, what can they expect?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's break it down, okay? So let's start with, say, this is just a 30 by 40 by 12 foot tall tubular building. Engineering will call for, hey, you need 12-inch footings or footers to support the weight of the structure itself, okay? But then there's a fine print detail, and that detail says, hey, it must go into undisturbed soil or past the frost line, okay? Whichever is deeper.
That leads to the next question, which is the undisturbed soil.
What is undisturbed soil, right? So undisturbed soil is the original ground that is sitting in your backyard or your property, okay? That soil has been compacted through gravity, erosion, and just years of constant weather changes. That compaction will always be stronger and more stable than any of the new alien soil that we bring in.
And by alien soil, I want to make sure that everyone understands. Alien soil is that new soil that doesn't belong there. It's pretty much the opposite of the undisturbed.
Correct. So the undisturbed soil is basically how your property is right now. And so the alien soil is all of the soil that we're bringing in out, from outside to level out your pad. And what we're going to do is we're going to compact that alien soil with the available equipment we can use on most residential properties. And that's extremely important. Engineers want us to make sure that the footings go deep into, past the alien soil into the undisturbed soil because it's stable, it's strong.
So that in turn affects your cost of what the footers are, correct?
That is correct. So for example, when we go and do your site visit, we take out our laser, we got the elevation, let's say it's going to be 13 inches off level. 13 inches is the drop. And so your footings will have to be definitely the 13 inches plus 12 inches because that's the requirement that needs to go into undisturbed soil or past the frost line. So now you're 13 plus 12, and then you're also 4 inches to be above grade, okay? And so basically we're leaving your finished floor elevation 4 inches above the existing grade. That way, if any water is pooling or when it rains here in Texas, it rains. And the water elevation, the rain elevation starts going up. So we're giving it at least minimum of 4 inches. So in total, the footing depth is 13 plus 12 plus 4, we're at 29 inches. That's how deep the footings are.
And so of course, this I think is the biggest difference between us and other contractors, especially with cost.
That is correct. So most skip that part. Unfortunately, we can't skip that part. And especially since we are a general contractor of the whole project. So we are responsible not just for the foundation, we're responsible for the whole entire project. So if you're having problems with your building, but it's really your foundation, we're responsible. As opposed to, if you only hire your concrete guy to just do that, and then the building they can point fingers. And unfortunately, we can't point fingers anywhere.
We'll point fingers down the hall and they'll point it back down to us, so.
And that's it. That's one of the main reasons that we must do the footings the way to make sure that it's done right and done right the first time. And so let me give you an example how this works. So let's say in that example, it was 13 inches off level. We left your footings at 12 inches. So basically your footing is still floating in the alien soil. It's not touching that stable ground. When we pour that concrete, it's gonna settle. And that's where you can have foundation issues.
Okay, Adbo, I know this isn't necessarily part of the process, but it does affect the site prep. For red iron metal buildings, those heavy duty steel columns, they can't just sit on any regular, foundation. Why is that, and how does it affect the process?
Yes, that is correct. So your building type really affects this process, this step right here. Because if it's tubular, then we don't need concrete squares and anchoring. If it's a red iron project, then we do. So depending which you decide on, if it goes through the red iron, like that's what you're selecting as your building, then we will need concrete squares and anchoring. And red iron is special because the columns are spaced out from 20 to 30 feet base spacing. And so that makes that all the load that obviously from the roof is all coming down to those specific columns at every 20 to 30 feet. Compared to tubular, where you have, columns every 5 to 10 feet, the loads are distributed more evenly, which requires a different type of foundation. So each red iron column needs reinforced concrete squares, typically gonna be a 2x2x2 or a 3x3x2. And that's gonna be depending on the size of your build. Now, the concrete squares also include obviously the reinforcement, but it also includes in there your weld plates or your bolts. That's definitely the material and the labor of setting those up. And that is extremely important. And for that reason, we always double check that process, because this is where the columns are gonna be anchored, and that's how you get your wind warranty as well as your wind certification for your structure.
So Adbo, we like to have all of our elevations for our foundations 4 inches above grade, because our Texas storms do not play around. Water starts pooling around the building and can potentially start seeping in. So that's why we like to raise it. But that kind of starts causing issues for a client who's driving up. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays into part here?
Yeah, and that's really important. Again, leaving your foundation elevation, your finished floor elevation 4 inches above your existing grade is extremely, extremely important. It does definitely add more cost to your footings, adds more cost to the top, to more dirt that needs to be brought in to set the pad. But then again, as what you're mentioning, that creates a problem, and that's accessibility. So we offer to build different approaches, which are ramps, and that's especially important for your doors, mostly garage doors and service doors. So what we can do is we can you know, just bring a little bit more extra dirt and we can compact right in front, so that way you can, you know, access, and that's usually going to be the most cost-effective option. Or we can also pour concrete. Okay, we can do a concrete, what we call like a ramp approach. And so these approaches ensure like a nice, smooth, safe, and easy access to all your doors and garage door openings, you know, regardless of the terrain. For some walk-in doors, we can also do some steps.
So how do we get the job done?
So we're definitely going to need equipment and most of the time, especially in residential projects, which is what we're talking a lot more, we're going to be using typically mini excavators for trenching to create the footings, internal cross beams, and then skid steer usually for grading, and that is definitely to, you know, level out the ground, and sometimes even a plate compactor for firming up and compacting the base. All these equipment usually will be listed in the site prep. And again, one size does not fit all.
So moving from equipment to get the land level and ready, now we have the concrete here. We have the concrete trucks. What equipment do we potentially need to get the concrete from the truck to the site?
Yeah, so if the foundation is tucked like behind a house, or we're working with like a narrow driveway, usually we're gonna need 3 types of most common equipment. We could need a ground line pump, which is a hose that runs through just on normal ground. Or concrete buggies, which is basically like a wheelbarrow with like it's motorized, and it's super easy and efficient to just drive it and carry the concrete to the site. Or we could need a boom pump, which is also a hose, but it's through the air. And so that's what will let us move, you know, the concrete with minimal tear to your property, and that's like your driveways, your lawn, even like utility lines to protect them.
And again, this is why we say every property and every project is so different, so unique. There's so many different scenarios. You mentioned sometimes we can't because of a driveway, sometimes we can't because maybe your utility line is there. So different things that can affect that, can affect the type of equipment that we're gonna need to move that concrete, and again, affect your cost.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, sometimes we'll need the equipment that will be used. Some of them can be used, some of them may not be used, or we might have to combine certain, like sometimes we'll need a ground line pump combined with a boom line pump. So it's very unique to your property.
So once everything has been completed, and this is at the very end of your project, so once your building has been completed, there's still one big step which kind of falls under the site prep, which is why we're talking about it here, and that is the final grade.
That is correct. So, as Anandela is mentioning, once we finish your site prep and we finish your concrete foundation, usually your grade around it is going to be really nice. That's how we leave it, really nice and tidy and nice and smooth. Then the building phase come in, the building guys, okay? So the building guys come in, and if we need equipment, we're usually gonna be using like a SkyTrack, scissor lifts, or like delivery trucks to deliver their heavy, deliver the materials. We can tear up your grounds around it, okay? So this is where the final grade comes in, where we come back with the skid steer to smooth it out and shape the area around your slab. Okay, if you're not getting equipment for your metal building, or like you don't need it for your metal building phase, then you don't have to worry about this. But if you do, this is really important. And the reason why we leave it as an option is because usually when we level out your pad, we're going to bring in, as we mentioned, we're going to bring either select fill or base fill. These type of material will still need erosion control because the project is going to be from 3 to 6 months. It will rain at some point and you're going to have erosion. It's very important to protect your foundation by doing some sort of landscaping, and that is maybe installing some sod, or installing some type of rocks around your foundation, again, to make sure that the foundation is nice and stable. The soil around it, the fill that was just brought in, is nice and stable and it's not eroding. So that is really important. Now, we do offer some landscaping, such as setting up sod. So if you're interested in that, don't forget to reach out to your salesperson or our site team while you're in the site department.
There's also some unexpected site prep cost that people tend to forget about.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna name a few big ones, and that is definitely like demolition. Say you have an old shed or a carport or an existing concrete pad there and you want to demolish it, there's going to be demolition. Tree removal, that's also if it's blocking even access to get to your property and you have to remove a tree to, to transport materials, or even where you are definitely going to set up your building. You can't set it up on a tree. Porta potty rental for longer builds. So sometimes we will need that. If it's a very large slab, we're going to be there out there for a long period of time. A porta potty, that way we're not having to lose time on the property and having some sort of accidents.
Pack! Stay up to date with everything we're up to by checking out our social media. You can find us at WolfSteel Buildings for behind the scenes actions. We share our latest projects, updates on what the team is working on, and all the exciting progress happening in real time. Don't miss out on the action and give us a follow.